All right, let's get into the right away. And today we need to see the fundamentals of ISA. What are all the types of ISA that are available and how are they different? ISA is instruction set architecture, and yesterday in my session, I clearly told you what is the purpose of ISA. ISA is a mediator which is going to help the software access the hardware and effectively utilize the available hardware in the best way possible. So we've got four types of or four classes of ISAs. We call it classes, or people also call it types. So in the question, if you see types or classes, don't get confused. Both are the same. They get address. They get to address the same thing. So we have got four types of ISAs listed. They are: first one is accumulator. The second one is stack. Third one is register, which is general purpose. The fourth one is register, which is load and store. Remember, all these have got its own significance: accumulator, stack, register, which is general purpose, register, which is load and store. Let's go step by step, one after another. And there are questions which are going to be asked in the same aspect in my first quiz also. So please pay attention. What is accumulator called as? Accumulator is always called as one address type of ISA. It is called as one address type of ISA. What do you mean by that? Very simple. In this approach, the content from the memory location or any register will be added by default with the content in the accumulator register, right? The moment you call it accumulator mode of ISA, accumulator would be one of the default operands, and one operand can be your memory location or your register, and they get to process with the content inside the accumulator and with the register or the memory location, and the result would be stored back to the accumulator. Remember, accumulator might not be explicitly presented as the part of instruction during this approach. If I say add R1, the content in the R1 is directly added with content in the A, and it need not be specified like add A comma R1. Some of the instruction set architectures explicitly present it also, some do not do that. So in that case also it is becoming the accumulator mode of ISA. This is called as one address type of ISA because we have one operand which is explicitly mentioned like R1, like the memory location. So this approach is accumulator centric. The focus is totally onto accumulator, and other register that we are giving is going to be another operand which will be worked out along with the accumulator content. For an instance, add R1, here you can see that I'm highlighting this R1's content will be added with the content in the accumulator, and the result will be stored back to accumulator. This is one mode of ISA. The second one is pretty easy for you, and you must have already learnt about it in your data structures and other subjects, including embedded systems. I think we have seen this. So what is it called as? This is called as stack mode of ISA. What do you mean by stack mode of ISA? Stack mode of ISA is all about pushing into the stack and popping from the stack. And this is called as a zero address instruction. Remember, zero address instruction. We do not have to mention any operand explicitly in this approach, and we have to just use the push and the pop instruction alone. When you say push, it will be pushed from the content of a particular register into the stack, and when you say pop, the content will be popped out into a register. You do not have to specify anything as an operand into it, and that's why people refer it as a zero address instruction. And see the way that things are working out here. This is the empty stack right now. I do not have anything in the stack, and I give a first push inside, and it will become one content, one level it is filled. I'll do a second push inside, I have got the second content filled, and when I do a first pop, the first content will be thrown off, and when I do a second pop, the second one is also going to be thrown off. Remember, the first push content will come out last, the last push content will come out first, right? The instructions that we are using whenever we go with ISA, which is a stack oriented, is push and pop alone. This is one type of ISA. Now, the next one is going to be important. We have got two classes in register type of ISAs. Two classes, remember. The first one is the register type of ISA with general purpose register, general purpose approach. The register type of ISA with load and store approach. What is it? Very simple. In this general purpose approach, this is a very general approach. So in this general purpose approach, the general purpose registers will be totally involved in the operations. It means you can see that the operands that we are using are general purpose registers. right? You can use accumulator as part of it, but still a general purpose register would be the major component in this particular addressing mode, particular ISA type. You can see that here, add A comma B. B is a general purpose register, or when you take 8051 kind of approaches, both are called as accumulators, but let's call it as B as general purpose register in this approach. A and B are added and the result will be moved to accumulator. Add A comma B comma C. The B and C are the general purpose registers, and I need to move the result into A in this case. So it can be 2 address instruction or it can be 3 address instruction, like the both are presented here. This is the way the register ISA is working, and this is totally connected and concerned with general purpose register. Now let's understand what is the final type of ISA, which is called as the load and store approach for register ISA. What is it, sir? It is very simple. Remember, you have learnt a lot about the load and store in the previous semester when it came to ARM7. What was load and store? Load is nothing but loading the content onto a register. Store is nothing but storing it into some other location. That's it. Without loading it into a register, you cannot do any operation in the RISC architecture, and we have seen that enough in the previous semester, so let me not waste time into it. So whenever an ISA forces you to go ahead with the load and store architecture, where only after you loading the content into a particular register you can do the operation, we call it register with load and store approach. Very simple. We are going to add the contents available in the location 1000 and 1200. You can see that here I am going to take the content from 1000 and 1200 is another memory location. I am depicted to add, I am described to add these two. So what do? I need to take the content from this location and I should first move it on to R1. Don't worry about this dollar and all. We will talk about it later. There is a lot of approaches that you need to follow towards presenting it and writing it appropriately. I'm going to talk about it little later in my next session or session after that, where the way you need to present this instructions are very important and we will talk about it. Don't worry about it right now. Sir, why dollar, sir? What does that symbolize? All those have meaning and we will talk about it later. Now, what do? We have got the register R1 completely loaded with the content from 1000. We've got register R2 which is completely loaded with the content from 1200. Now, I have got R1 and R2 filled with the appropriate contents that we need to add, and add R1 comma R2 is what we are going to do. This is given as multiply. No, I did a mistake. It is addition, right? So add R1 comma R2 is now done. Now what do we need to do? We need to store the result in 1300. I have got the contents, I mean the operands from 1000 and 1200. I need to store the result into 1300. So what do? We store at location 1300 from R1. That's it. Whenever you use the RISC approach of loading and storing into the registers and to do the operation, if you are mandated to do that, then we call it the register with load and store approach of ISA. That's it. Now I want you to try it out in your notebook. Please have a notebook with you. Try out the simple exercise that I'm going to give you. This one I'll explain quickly. Maybe you will have to try it out in some other exercise that I'm going to give you right now after this. I'm going to implement R equal to A star B in all the 4 ISA patterns, right? R equal to A star B. What do? Push A. It need not be push A actually. It should be push pop alone. But here, to make it very specific and to explain you that we are pushing the content from A, we do this. Otherwise, we will first load the content into a register and we will do a push. And then we load the content into another register, we will do a push. That will automatically push the content from the register. So don't ask me why A is here, sir, why B is here. You said that there will not be any operands here. Yes, there are no operands required. But in this case, for you to clearly understand, I have put the operands here, but otherwise we will use the registers and the registers would have the content inside, and when you do just push, the content from the register will go, and when you do a pop, the content from the stack will go on to the same register. Are you all capable of understanding and following me carefully? I need one acknowledgement here. Can you all understand? Pavitra? Anybody? Nitin?
Yes, sir.
Am I audible? Am I audible? Great. So now see that push A. What is the first operand? A is the first operand. Push B. What is the second operand? B is the second operand. Then we can have an instruction called mult, and the result should be popped out into a particular register called R, because R is the destination register. Now when you go with general purpose operation, it is very easy. Mul R comma A comma B. Now the content in the A and B can be multiplied and it can be given into R. All these are general purpose registers, so it is pretty easy for us to operate. Now accumulator based ISA, load A, the content is loaded into one of the contents is loaded into A, another content is into B already. So when you use mul B, it will automatically multiply the content with A and the result will be stored appropriately in R using the next instruction. That's it. It's very simple. And the final one is load and store. What do? We need to store the content from A into one register, B into another register. Then we can do the multiplication operation and we can store the result back into this particular register as per requirement. If they have given you the memory location as the requirement, you need to move the result into memory location. Now, I want you to do this exercise in your note and you can show me that in tomorrow's session by just presenting it in the webcam. A equal to B plus C into C minus D. A equal to B plus C into D minus E. Make a note of it clearly. A equal to B plus C into D minus E. I want you to use all the 4 types of ISA and implement it in the notebook and present me that. You just write it out and show me that whenever I ask, and just follow the same structure. This is sufficient for you to follow it up. I hope it was clear and concise. If you have any doubts in this, we can probably discuss right now. Any doubts till now? It's now time for us to understand the instruction execution cycle and the terms related to COA. There are some things that we need to give a recap, and the first couple of sessions would obviously be that. So please be patient with me in understanding all these terms again, which you must be already aware of in some cases. So let's understand what is what are the fundamental terminologies that we need to know through this session, and by tomorrow probably we will go into the detailed understanding of COA content. Right. What will happen when you run an instruction? What will happen when you have series of instructions and when you compile it? When you run it, what happens? What is the process that is going on inside? Let me tell you that in detail, and then we will go into this flow. We've got a flow here, right? I'll go into this flow after I explain you the general C structure that we follow. You have written a C program. For an instance, let's understand. You have written a C program to print I love India 5 times. I repeat, you have written a C program to print I love India 5 times. You are using a GCC compiler, and what do we do first? We will go ahead and we will give GCC hyphen C file name. I have given GCC hyphen C file name dot C. Hyphen C option, remember I am using hyphen C option which you must not have used earlier. In that case, please learn it right now at least. GCC hyphen C 1.c for an instance. This tells GCC that you got a C file as an input and this C file should be converted as an object file. 1.o will be ready right now. Right? What is the next step? The next step is to convert this object file into an executable file. GCC hyphen o, you can give some name as Sachin, for example SA, and what is the input? 1.o. The moment you compile this, you will get an executable file by name Sachin and it can be run with /Sachin. This is what you have followed all these days. And let me tell you what happens inside. When you compile a file, first it will check for all the syntactical errors. It will check for the presence of header files properly, and then it will convert all the contents into an object file. From the main till end, it will convert it to object file. You may have used some libraries, you may have used some other functions, and all of them are to be converted into object files. And I may have 3 object files right now, like 1.o, 2.o, or 3.o, something like that I may have. In that case, I cannot keep them all separately. So what do? I need to combine all of them together to get one final executable file name by name called Sachin. So that's what is done during the entire compilation process. When you do GCC-C, it gets the object file. When you get GCC-O, it links all the object files together to get one final executable file called as Sachin. And when you run it, that Sachin is a binary file which gets loaded onto the RAM, which also gets the processor time, and you see the output. This is exactly what is happening in the entire flow. Remember, this is what is happening in the entire flow. But let's understand how does it work in terms of instruction set. I told you in terms of simple C program, right? Now it's time for us to understand how exactly it goes in terms of instruction set. What is the first step? The first step is to fetch the instruction from the instruction memory or program memory. Remember, we have our code stored in instruction memory or program memory. What is the next step? We have seen that in the previous semester, where fetch, decode and execute are the three very important components there in any instruction execution. So the first step, fetching, is done, and then I'll go with decoding the instruction. Here, if the instruction is all correct, it will be decoded properly and it would be understood as in what is the instruction meant for, what are all the operands that are to be used, where do we have the operands located, how do we pull that operand. All these will be decoded properly using this instruction decode cycle. That's it. Once it is all done, it will come to the next level where it will go ahead and extract the contents out from that locations, extract the operands properly, and it is ready for the operation to be performed. What is the next cycle? We have gone with fetch, we have gone with the decode. Now the next one is called execute. We need to execute. When you are ready with everything, you can go ahead and do the operation. C equal to A plus B, I mean add A comma B comma C can be done right now. And after it is done, I need to store the result into a memory location or into a register. Whatever is your requirement, based on your requirement sheet, you can store the result back to a memory location or it can come to a register. Now what is the next step? This is the most important step that we all have to remember and to write it in the paper or in the quiz as appropriately as asked. Load the program counter with the next instructions address. Only then the same sequence can continue here. As you can see that here, only when the program counter gets updated with the next instructions address, you can move it to the next level. Otherwise it can't move. Now comes the point. Sir, how will the program counter automatically get updated with the next instructions address? The current address for an instance is 1000. How will I go to the next instructions address? For example, let me have it here. I have got current address as 1000. I mean the current instruction. The next instruction is at 1004. So how does it work, sir? Who updates it? There will be an ALU and the ALU will have the adder functionality available. The adder would add 1000 plus 4. The moment the instruction is all done, it would be done in parallel and this would be updated into the program counter. Remember, this is not done automatically and we have got adder sitting there doing this work. The adder will do a +4 or +8 or +2 based on the architecture that you follow and it is going to do that work. Remember, this is a very important point and if you forget it, your entire workflow is hit. This is the instruction execution cycle. Whenever there is a question which is asked in the paper regarding the instruction execution cycle, you need to talk about this flow. That's it. This is the process how the instruction gets running. Very simple and easy to understand, I believe. Right. We have seen this all very clearly in the previous semester. Let me quickly give you what is the recap of it. What is a program counter? You know what is it? It enables the faster execution. It does not let you wait for anything to be done after the current instruction. It is a register. It can be a 16-bit or a 32-bit register. The program counter is updated with the correct address of the next instruction through an adder, as I just told you. And the next is stack and stack pointer. The stack is a temporary storage area. You can store any content over there and the stack gets updated properly through the stack pointer moving in the top of the, it can be filled in the top of the stack only. As you know, I keep moving it. Stack pointer is a register, stack is a memory location. The stack pointer can be a 16-bit or 32-bit register, remember it. What is a bus? The bus is going to play a vital role in the entire COA subject, whatever we are going to learn even after this. So remember, bus is the one which is going to carry the content. If I have to send data, it has to be data bus. If I have to send address, I will have to go with address bus. And it can be single bus which can carry both data and address based on the type of bus and operations that you are choosing. Oh, we need to be cautious about it. This is just fundamental recap that we have done. And the next one is going to be quickly CISC versus RISC. I'm going to not waste much time here. Instead, I'll quickly take an example and I'll explain you what is it. Then we will go ahead with the next topic, which is core and more related to the subject. This is just a recap as I told you already. What is the CISC approach? Very simple. The CISC approach is nothing but the approach which is followed by Intel. Intel follows CISC approach. So what do we do here? It is going to be very easy for the programmer, but internally it will be difficult for the hardware to handle it. So mul R1 comma R2 is the only instruction that you want towards getting two numbers multiplied if you are using the CISC approach. So it is very easy for the programmer to write the code. It is going to occupy very less memory. So it is totally the Intel's approach. But what Apple says is it is going to follow the load and store architecture where the programmer has to write 4 lines of code for doing a similar operation, but it has a lesser load on the hardware itself. It has a lesser load on the processor itself, but programmers have to face a little more programming and they will have to write little more lines of code where memory will also be used more because you've got 4 lines of code. And remember, this is all about load and store architecture where you need to load the content into the register and then get the operation done and store the content back into your memory location. This is what Apple follows, right? Let's conclude it that way, this way. I have taught you this the previous semester. Again, I'm talking about this because we are going to follow the entire RISC architecture in the entire semester. So you need to clearly understand the difference. Intel clearly believes that hardware has to bear more responsibility. Apple believes that the hardware has to be simple and software has to lift the more responsibility. Shouldering responsibility with software is supported by Apple. Shouldering responsibility through hardware is supported by Intel. But there is going to be more of a combination of these two in near future, where it's going to be features from RISC and also from CISC, which will be connected together for generating better process. Already research work is on where they are trying to combine these two features to bring out something really useful. We have seen this in the previous semester and I'm not going to talk about it. I leave it to you for 1 minute so that you can go through the differences between the RISC and the CISC and understand one point. Whenever you go with RISC architecture, it is very easy to do pipelining because it is going to be step by step. You load and store. So the pipelining would be very easy there and it's very supported when you go with RISC. And most important point that we need to understand when it comes to RISC is that the load and store architecture is mandatory and is explicitly to be supported. There is no option that you can escape out of the load and store. These two are the major differences that we need to understand. This one I think we have discussed clearly in the previous semester. Do we need to discuss this again? I need your acknowledgement. Can one of you say that do we need to go with this again? Little Indian and Big Indian. Do we need to go with that Indianness? Not required, right? No is the answer, I believe. Am I right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so you see it yourself, but there will be questions from this, and later on, don't tell me that Sriram sir did not teach this. Okay, there can be questions, there can be discussion on this, so make sure that you guys go through it because this is also fundamental. And Harvard and Von Neumann architecture also we have seen clearly. Just go through it. 1 second, we will go through it quickly. Harvard architecture says that they will have separate buses, where Von Neumann architecture says that they will have only one bus out there for program and data. That's a major difference that you have between the Harvard and the Von Neumann architecture, right? So till now we have seen the fundamental points like I'll quickly give a recap. ISA today, what is ISA? What are all the types of ISAs? And I took an example. I gave you an assignment also. I believe you guys will do it. And then we came to instruction execution cycle and I explained you what is the flow of it. Fundamental terms, we did a recap. I quickly spent around 2 minutes for you to understand the CISC versus RISC. And we went for Little Indian and Big Indian and I skipped it because you guys said you know it. And the quick comparison between Harvard and Von Neumann is also presented. Please go through this table. This is very, very important. Without this table, you will not be able to crack interview questions. This is a very important interview questions even at this level for me to attend interviews. If I have to attend interviews, I need these questions. This is very fundamental and very basic. So remember it. I have one assignment for you for the day. I'm going to give one simple assignment. So make sure that you guys do it. Tomorrow there will be a small questioning session, question answer session on this. Addressing modes, all these types of addressing modes we have seen: immediate, direct, indirect, register, register indirect, indexed and stack. We have seen all these in the previous semester. I'm not going to waste even 1 minute in teaching this again because we have already seen it and that's sufficient for you. I have given the clear intimation in this slides and I have shared the slides with you. I request people to please go through it and then come back to me tomorrow so that we need not spend time on the same thing that has been already taught. Can we go to the next topic? Kids, can we go to the next topic? I need an acknowledgement, please. Be reactive.
Yes, sir.
Right.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Right. I'm getting into MIPS. So all of you please be attentive. And this session is going to be the fundamental session for the entire semester. I'm telling about the semester. So remember, whatever I'm talking here is going to come a long way till the 45th hour that we are going to complete in November. Right. So what is MIPS? Most of you would have got an idea or got a perception as MIPS is nothing but million instructions per second. Correct? 99% of us would have got that in our mind when we talk about MIPS. Even I did the same when I started studying this paper. But it is not MIPS as million instructions per second in this. It is instead microprocessor without interlocked pipeline stages. Remember, it is microprocessor without interlocked pipeline stages, which is abbreviated as MIPS. It is an ISA, it is an instruction set architecture, it has got 32-bit instructions. All the instructions are 32 bits wide. Remember, this is a very important aspect. All the instructions are 32 bits wide. And it is 100% risk architecture. It is 100% risk. We cannot escape risk here, and it is 100% risk architecture. And whenever you talk about risk architecture, it is always fixed with instructions, which means that all the instructions are to be equal size or are to be equally sized, and that's called fixed with instructions. And remember, all the instructions that we are going to learn here and use here must be stored as a word aligned address. This is a very important interview question and also very important question whenever you talk about COA or MIPS. What is this word aligned address? What is word aligned address? Very simple. The addresses must be divisible by 4. Wherever we store a content, that address should be divisible by 4. There cannot be an address which is non-divisible by 4 be called as word aligned address. MIPS has to be completely with word aligned address, and all the instructions must be stored in word aligned address only. Do you all understand? It is word aligned address that we are going to use. Right. Sir, what was the start, sir? How did it all go with MIPS, and when did it start? Let me tell you, when I did my BTech in 2000 to 2004 time frame, we studied about Intel 8085 as well as Motorola 6800. They are one address architecture, and they were the first of that kind in that time. We started using them, and we had to use the hardware board to process and to program. And then came 86 x86 architecture, where we had two address architecture available. Two operands would be there by default. So A equal to A plus B is what is I'm talking about. And then came MIPS architecture. Sir, how old is MIPS, sir? It is almost as old as me. It is early 90s and late 80s it started evolving, and it is a 3 address architecture, which means we are permitted to have 3 operands. Remember, 3 operands were first introduced when you started using MIPS. MIPS is the first, and that was the best of the kind of architecture which supported the 3 architecture content. Remember it. Right. The next one, we need to go in depth about MIPS, and I'm going to go slow, and it's step by step process. So please have a clear attention for all this. Right. Why do we need MIPS, sir? Why there are so many architectures available already, so many ISAs already available? Why do we need MIPS? Whomever you ask, whomever programmer, whichever programmer is very familiar with assembly language programming, you ask, initially they would have struggled a lot to get into assembly language programming. The reason is very simple. It was not as easier as your normal high level programming languages. Your high level programming languages are very easy because they are English like. You can write code with C program or C++ or Java, and it is very easy because they are English like. So the considerations towards making the assembly language programming also easier, making the usage of the processor architecture easier, was the main reason for somebody to invent MIPS. It is designed by having high level languages in mind. Means the usage of high level languages is already there with us. So we need to take the same level of understanding to understand MIPS, and it's supported. Very simple. Anybody can learn MIPS with ease if you have some fundamental knowledge of any other programming languages, which is called high level programming. That's the fundamental reason. That's the basic reason we went for MIPS. Second, parallelism is increased here. Pipelining is supported here. Both are very, very important here. What is pipelining? I told you this already. When I am manufacturing the first bike or painting the first bike in the production line, the second bike should be ready for me to be painted next. The same is the case with instruction set. I have 5 instructions. I need to have the rest of the instructions ready for it to be processed. And MIPS is 100% load and store architecture, right? The number of general purpose registers are really higher, and we have lot more general purpose registers to be used when we compare it with 8051 or 8085. When you go with MIPS architecture, which is fundamentally load and store, we will get more number of general purpose registers, and all the instructions are 32-bit wide. Remember, there is no instruction which you can spot which is not 32-bit wide. And what will happen because of this? Because of this, the hardware considerations for all the instructions become very uniform. You can easily access and you can easily make a board for a uniform instruction set with, instead of you making different instructions having different size of hardware. That's a very, very important point. All the instructions when they are of uniform size, all the instructions when they are of uniform width, you can easily make the hardware, and the hardware considerations are pretty easy there. And MIPS has got arithmetic, logical, shift, comparison, control, load and store, exception, register movement, and all these general operations, whatever you have seen till now in any other architecture, is all supported here. We are going to learn one after this. I repeat, the entire semester you are going to be married to MIPS architecture, and you will learn MIPS instructions. You will learn how MIPS related hardware works. You will learn the flow of MIPS from left to right, as I normally used to say, and it's going to be very interesting and very easy. I want each one of you to draw the architecture that I'm going to show from here on. Please keep it in a paper, start drawing. Only then you will get used to it. Only then you will get understanding about how do we use this all clearly whenever needed. And then the most important point with which I will complete today's session is the classification of the instruction types as I, R, and J. This is very, very, very important question. I, R, and J. There are only 3 instruction types in MIPS. They are I type, R type, and J type. Let's go one by one. And with this, I'll stop the session today. I want you to be very clear about this point, so please listen to it carefully. All the MIPS instructions are 32 bits wide. I made it very clear already. It starts with 0, it ends with 31. It starts with 0, ends with 31 here, and same is the case here as well. This is R type, this is I type, this is J type. Sir, what is it, sir? Very simple, I'll tell you. MIPS has got R type instructions, which means the registers are going to be the major components of the instruction. R type instructions will have all the operands as registers. You can see that here S1, S2, S1, S1 and S2 are the 3 registers. Don't worry about why I named as S1. I'll talk about it little later. If you want to zoom it a little bit, I can zoom in a little bit. You can see that here. Now you can see that this is the R type instruction format, and 32-bit is the format for it, 0 to 31, and it must be in the same pattern. You cannot alter it. Where if the instruction has got register, register, and register, 3 registers are there, that is referred as R type instruction. That's it. Now what is the format here? The format is very simple. It will start with 0, it will end with 31. So I'm going to go the same way. The function bits are the first set of bits from 0 to 5. What is it? It specifies what is the function that we are going to operate. What is the operation that we are going to do? This is called function. Opcode and function are different. We'll see that little later. Don't worry for now, but understand this is function field. 0 to 5. The first 6 bits are called as the function bits. Now, SA is nothing but shift amount. How many bits we need to shift? R type instructions are also going to support you shift operations. We'll see that later. Don't worry. For now, understand there is a field called shifting, and the first field is called function bits, where we have got 6 bits in it, and the second field is called shift amount, where we have got 5 bits in it. So how many bits are completed? 6 plus 5 are done. So totally 11 bits are done. So it must be 0 to 10. And this has to be the sequence followed for the registers. You cannot change it. The first one is RD, second one is RT, third one is RS. RD is the destination register, RT is the source register, RS is the another source register. RT can serve as a destination also, but predominantly we will use it as only source registers in R type instructions. RD is destination. This is where you will store the result. RS and RT are the source registers, and we have got 5 bits for each of this, because what is 2 to the power of 5? It is only 32. So that's why we have got 5 bits here, 5 bits here, and 5 bits here. So totally 6 plus 5, 11, 11 plus 15 is done. So what is left out? I have got only 6 fields left out here, and that is for your opcode. That is nothing but your operation code. Is it clear? I made it very slow. It starts with the function, it ends with the opcode. The function code will tell you what is the function that I'm doing. Function code will tell you is it an addition operation or a subtraction operation. Opcode will tell you what type of operation it is. Is it an R type or something like that? Don't worry about it right now. I'll clarify it clearly in the next session where we'll have some examples. I want to go slow in this, so let me repeat it. Function code, SA is the shift amount. I do not have any shifting operations done right now, so let's not worry about it. This is 5-bit. These three are the most important contents here: RD, RT, and RS. In exam or in quiz, if you change RT and RD and write, it is wrong. You cannot go with altering the positions of this, and these positions are rigid and solid. You cannot change it. Remember, if you change it and tell me that, sir, what's wrong? It's wrong. You cannot do it. Right? Now, when you write it, how do you write it, sir? It is RD followed by RS and RT. It is RD followed by RS and RT. First register is your destination register. The second one is your source 1. Third one is your source 2. RD followed by source 1 followed by source 2. Here, how do you write it? RD, RT, RS. But when you write it here, you got to be careful. It is RD, RS1 and RS2, or RS and RT. You call it the way you want. Now, we go into the next type, which is called I-type instruction. What is I-type? Let's go from right to left again. That will be easy for us. The first 15 bits, 16 bits are called offset. This is I-type. I-type is immediate instruction. Okay. What is the offset? The value that you need to work on, the offset that you need to work on will be specified here. The 16 bits will be specified. And I need source and destination bit as usual, destination registers as usual. RT is the, you can see that RT is the target register, RS is the source register, and both of them are 5 bits wide only, and first 16 bits are available for the offset. The second 5 bits are given for RT, the third 5 bits are given for RS, and the operation code will be taking 6 bits. And if you see, there will be a consistency. 6 bits for operation code is consistently followed everywhere. It's only 6 bit. The function code will not be available here because it is going to be immediate operation. We have got offset. You will understand this clearly when I give you an example. For now, understand, whenever you talk about immediate addressing mode, it carries an offset and it has got 16-bit content followed by 2 registers, RS and RT. Right. The final one here in this flow is the jump. What do you mean by jump? I'll have to move the control to a different memory location using this jump instructions. And the jump instruction is straightforward. If you give jump label, it will jump to that location. The label is nothing but a memory location. Now, the first 6 bits you cannot change. I mean, the last 6 bits, 26 to 31, you cannot change. The opcode is fixed. So what is the number of bits that are left out? 0 to 25. Just mark it for address for jump. That's all. Example is very simple. Add a plus b jump label. Once this instruction is executed, it will jump to the label, and the label is nothing but is going to specify the 26 bits address. That's all. It's very simple and easy. We have got 3 types of addressing mode. The first one is R type. The second one is I type. The third one is J type. R, I, J. R is 100% connected to the registers. I is 100% connected to immediate operations, which includes add immediate kind of operations. Jump is to transfer the control to a different memory location. That's it. It's very easy, and this one is to be remembered. And tomorrow there will be a quiz. I'm going to conduct a quiz by randomly picking people, as in what is this instructions all about, how do we use it. I'll ask you questions on that, and I hope you will definitely answer. Please go through this entire presentation for the day without fail, and come prepared tomorrow, and that's it for the day.